Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the Thursday, July 20th, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting. And first on here, we have our roll call, and I'll show that we have Councilmember Schneider and Councilmember Althauser and myself, Councilmember Swarth out of it here present. And so, I know we've got Dan, and we were looking at doing a change in the agenda. And so he had asked if we could look at, do we have to do a motion to, we don't have to approve our agenda, do we? It's not on the thing here. Okay, Michael, thank you. I always make sure I'm doing the right thing. So we're going to go ahead and do the service provider agreement first and take action on that item. So who's leading that one? Is it you, Dan?
Yeah, I'll be kicking them off. I'll turn it over to Meredith. She'll do a presentation, and I appreciate the flexibility there. Just we want to make sure we had enough time. There were lots of conversation around the discussion items that we took care of the action item first. So yeah, this is an amendment with Stantec, who's been working with us on the Pioneer Park restoration project. Meredith will kind of give some background as to where we are in the project today, and then I'll come back and do the official ask for you. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Meredith.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. Good morning, all. All right, so as Dan mentioned, I'm here to talk again about the Pioneer Park Repair and Restoration Project. You've all seen this a couple of times, so I'll kind of speed through a little bit of the background, but dive more into what we've been up to in the last 6 months, really, and kind of where we're hoping to go moving forward. So a little bit of place setting, Pioneer Park. We're talking about specifically this one area on kind of the southwestern side of Pioneer Park where it meets the river. This project site is really, really active. So we have the river, the Deschutes River, running right by it, and it moves probably about 10 feet per year down there, which is awesome. It's what a river does naturally. However, when we're working in an area such as this, where we have a park to consider and a number of other impairments such as water quality to consider, it can create a little bit of a problem. So we've seen a ton of movement, even in kind of the last 8 years since this project really started trying to figure out what are solutions for this area down here to help slow bank erosion, to replant the riparian area. As you can see, there are kind of trees on either side of this area where we do have erosion, but the center area, which is being eaten away, doesn't have that kind of cover. So what options are there? Ultimately, the Deschutes River and Pioneer Park specifically is really at risk for high temperatures of the water, a lot of fine sediment, which the Pioneer Park site is one of the top 10 sediment producers along the Deschutes River. In addition, insufficient wood. Normally a river would have a nice riparian area with a lot of trees. Those trees would end up falling in. They create great habitat for all the fish and all those other kind of things. In addition, there's often impaired riparian conditions that kind of ties to the lack of wood. When we're thinking about Pioneer Park in particular, we also have to remember that this is a park that is really heavily used by Tumwater residents and everyone around Thurston County. So we need to make sure we're taking the public risk into consideration here. As you can see in the bottom photo, the river doesn't really care about where trails are and things like that. So making sure that we're creating a safe option for folks down there is really important. In addition, the park floods pretty darn often. So what can we do and make sure that when we're creating solutions down here, we're keeping that in mind? With all of that being said, we went to the Department of Ecology and asked for some grant funding in order to do design, permitting, and construction work to figure out an alternative down there. Tumwater was awarded about $450,000, which was an awesome news, and we're able to hire Stantec to complete the design and permitting. Ultimately, the project had 3 years within the grant funding time to finish the designs, permitting, and construction. We thought that was all great, that was going to work out nicely. Originally, we had planned for this kind of schedule of getting our grant agreement would run from October 2021 until October of 2024. We'd be able to do designs and all of that. In projects like this that are pretty complicated and are working with an active water body like the Deschutes River, we always try and get feedback from permitting agencies first and foremost to make sure that the timelines are realistic. We bring the stakeholders to the table as soon as possible. So last fall, myself and Grant Gilmore from the City of Tumwater met with representatives from the Department of Ecology and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to talk a little bit about the project. And they threw a giant wrench in our whole plan. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers let us know that any project that was doing in-water work, pretty much if we were putting anything in the Deschutes River, that it would require at least a 2-year permitting timeline review, which kind of throws off of our 3-year plan in order to get everything done. So we thought, okay, let's try and take a creative approach to this. Originally, if we decided to focus on bank stabilization and riparian restoration, if we end up building about 5 feet back from where the bank is, we'd be able to put all of these large woody debris structures and things like that in place without touching the water, and know that the next winter, when the rains got really heavy and the river got big, it would erode back and it would end up meeting the project where it was. This approach allowed us to avoid having to go through permitting through the Army Corps of Engineers and really allowed us to stay within that 3-year time limit. It would ultimately look a little bit like having 16 different log structures, sloping the area back, and then the whole green highlighted area would be replanted with native trees and shrubs. Like I had mentioned earlier, we really like to make sure that we talk to stakeholders before we get too far along in the process. So we brought this to the stakeholder group for this project. That include representatives from RIA 13, the Squaxin Island Tribe, Thurston Conservation District, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Ecology, Puget Sound Partnership, Olympia, and City of Tumwater's Parks Department, and Stantec, who's the project consultant on this project. We brought this to them in early kind of January and February of this year, and ultimately we were returned with a not approved consensus. The group felt that there wasn't enough in this approach that would help to restore normal river functions. Because we weren't doing any in-water work, we were relying a lot more on kind of bank stabilization efforts and things that didn't necessarily have as many co-benefits for things like salmon habitat. So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board. We knew what our goal was. We were trying to find a solution to meet the water quality and habitat goals down there that the City of Tumwater and the project stakeholders have, all while trying to fit within the Department of Ecology's requirements for the funding that we had and the timelines there. So after a lot of negotiations between many different parties, we were able to come up with kind of a new plan. So the new plan is going to focus on multi-benefit, designing solutions that are able to increase river complexity, follow natural kind of solutions that rivers normally would have in areas like this, include habitat, and would work with the river. The kind of design on the right is an example of what this looks like. This was something that came out of Skagit County and a park they had there. Ultimately, this would look a little bit different for the City of Tumwater. We wouldn't be looking at building into Pioneer Park, but instead seeing about the opportunities to reactivate some of the side channels here as we see the river is coming around this bend. With all of that said, we were able to get the Department of Ecology to agree to change our current grant to design only. That would give us time and flexibility as well as funding to be able to complete the design and permitting, while also applying for a new grant this fall for construction funding. Now, the really great news about that is kind of twofold. One, it would restart our grant clock. So we would have from 2024 until 2027 to complete construction of the project, giving us a much better time and giving us that 2 years for the U.S. Department of Army Corps, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permitting timeline of 2 years. In addition, the Department of Ecology has also decided for the first time that grants like this that Tumwater would receive, which would be centennial non-point funding, would no longer require a match. So that would help save Tumwater ultimately in the long run from cost of construction for the project. This requires a couple of steps over the next couple of months in order to make sure everything lines up properly. The first step is what I'm bringing here today, and that's updating the service provider agreement with Stantec. This is helping to account for that change in approach that we're looking for, redoing the design, doing some additional permitting work. This would also increase the grant time, the agreement timeline until 2027, which is the new project end date. It would increase their budget by about $50,000 to help them complete everything that we had outlined in the new approach. After we get that squared away, the City of Tumwater would work with the Department of Ecology to amend the current grant agreement. Stantec and the project stakeholders would work on updating the conceptual designs. And then Tumwater would take those to the Department of Ecology this fall to apply for construction funding. I know that was a lot of things, but I'm going to turn it kind of back over to Dan with a staff request before opening it up for questions.
Thanks, Meredith. Yeah, so as you can see, there's been a lot of moving parts with this with this project. But, I think at the end of the day, it's been fairly successful in terms of getting, stakeholder buy-in on the project, support for, this, and kind of really setting up a collaborative model of showing how we can get projects like this done in the watershed and in Tumwater with stakeholder support and with the Department of Ecology to secure, some agreement on at least, this changing this, and then looking forward to additional construction funds that we'll apply for later this year. And as Meredith pointed out, and we'll talk about next, as we're looking at the CFP, there's lots of strain and stress on the utilities for to complete some of these big projects, and recognizing that there's no match expected is a very good opportunity for the city. So with that, I'm requesting that the Public Works Committee recommends City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign service provider agreement with Stantec for the Pioneer Park Restoration Project, amendment number 2, which is extending time and money to complete the design and permitting portion of this project.
With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
All right. I'm sure we have questions. Who would like to? Oh, Michael's on there yet. This is such a work in progress. It's been amazing. I think since, yeah, she shakes her head up and down. Yeah. So, because I remember like when I first came on council, learning about is it TMDLs and things like that. So yes.
Yeah, and you might remember way back in the day too. We were originally working with the Recreation and Conservation Office and South Puget Sound Salmon Enhancement Group to work on this project. And we had received funding for design and and they were tentatively holding on to construction. But at that time, the RCO decided they weren't able to fund the construction element and only funded the design. And so we've been working on this project since, I want to say, 2012, trying to get some funding to move this thing forward with stakeholder support. So this has been a long project in the making.
So I guess waiting has kind of turned out to be a good thing in a way, though it's interesting to see that how much the river has taken away from like that top piece that that top portion's completely gone. So concerns about any delay in delaying this? Do we have concerns, that real, huge concerns about this?
I mean, yes, absolutely. Every day we wait, every season we wait, more erosion is happening. And so, it is, it was one of the challenges earlier on when we learned about the permitting window and said, okay, can we shift to make this get at least something done in the near term? And that's where, kind of stakeholders said, no, we really need to kind of look at this holistically, get this done, as a singular project, even if it is going to sacrifice, a little bit more of the shoreline in the near term, to get a fully funded construction project from Ecology and permitted from the Corps, was the direction we needed to go. So ultimately, that's where we're at.
Okay. Everybody else is kind of frozen, so I didn't know if Councilmember Schneider, did you have any questions?
I have a question. Am I frozen? Can people hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
I just can't see you. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So the group that we've consulted with, it includes the Squaxin and City Olympia and that list, which I'm glad we are talking to so many of our colleagues and allies in trying to make this project work. They support kind of what I'm visualizing as this third alternative. Well, I guess it's the second alternative to the original proposal, but that's something that the stakeholder group is in support of. They had concerns about the log strategy. I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah, they were basically the stakeholder group, which is makes up a significant portion of the RIA 13 like lead entity group that are dealing with salmon and in water habitat improvement issues, water quality issues. They were very supportive of a more comprehensive approach versus just kind of doing the shoreline work in the near term, which we were originally proposing given the delay with the permitting timeline. And they recognize that. They said, okay, yeah, we recognize it is going to take a little longer to get this done, but ultimately, the project would be better off for doing the in-water work as well. The fish will be better off, water quality will be better served. So, ultimately, yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer, but we're going to get a better project out of it.
Okay. And so I guess what I don't totally get is, we buy a new timeline and then we actually save a match, which is, that's fantastic. But I don't totally understand the difference between where we're landing with the new future plans for deciding what it'll look like versus our plans for what it was originally going to look like, other than that kind of cut through that notch. I don't know what the right word is, but where it goes around the bend and it cuts through there.
Right.
Like, are we essentially buying time, or are we changing a lot of what it'll actually physically be in the future?
So Meredith can jump in, any moment here, but I believe what we're doing is we're really going to be, and it hasn't been designed yet, so we don't have a design to show you. We just have some concepts we can, throw back up there, like what Meredith showed from Skagit River. But basically, we're keeping the shoreline work design to some degree, and it's going to be adding additional like like revetments or different channel options. As Meredith said, that there's that one area that we'll be looking to kind of recreate and rechannelize flow through, so that way we're going to be adding those elements, and that's the in-water work that's going to take a little bit longer with the permitting through the Corps to make sure that, water quality is being served, flow is being served. We're not creating challenges downstream for, adjacent property owners or, the park even, so it's going to be it's keeping a lot of the same pieces, but also adding more of the work in the water to redirect flows, to reduce energy, and reduce erosion, from that water as it's moving. Anything to add to that, Meredith?
Yeah, that was great, Dan. Kind of like he said, it's taking the current designs and going another couple of steps further and having more in-water work. It wouldn't just be one section of bank that's being kind of hardened a little bit and protected from erosion. It's really taking a comprehensive look at what else can we do within the area? Can we reduce the amount of water going there by activating a side channel? Can we put a little bit more large woody debris there that provides habitat for salmon and also helps to move flow away from that channel? How much can we look at kind of revegetating the whole area in order to help create that shade cover, help create that large woody debris kind of recruitment in that area? So it's going above and beyond what we currently have, which is really what project stakeholders were looking at, and is really more of a comprehensive watershed scale approach to habitat restoration.
Okay, that's helpful. Like, what I wasn't really able to discern was whether we're compromising to sort of meet the timeline and the bureaucratic requirements for the Corps, or if we're actually expanding the scope of the project to be a better thing. And it sort of sounds like the latter, because it's going to involve everything you just laid out, whether it's additional shoreline or that side channel that we'll construct. So yeah, I guess to Eileen's point, it sort of seems like like every year we waste, that's a challenge, but it sort of seems like a happy matter of happenstance or circumstance where we'll be able to save some funds and end up with a better project.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. I think it's overall, it is a better approach to the project site. It took some heartache to get here and a lot of negotiations, but I think ultimately we are going to get a better product out of it.
And at the end of the day, we're going the direction that we were ultimately trying to go with that original designs that we had with RCO, Recreation Conservation Office. So, yes, the in-water work, the expansion of this project, the delay, we're not, I'm not excited about, because I've been seeing this project every year and I'm seeing that the shoreline and the sediment happen. But, at the end of the day, we're going the direction we need to go.
Okay. One final question. I think the legislature this year put in like a ton of money for riparian and for salmon restoration. If we do this timeline, are we still going to be able to potentially access those new funds? Like, I think they put in like $50 million between RCO and the State Conservation Commission to develop programs to achieve things that seem pretty similar to this.
I know Meredith's following that and is working on applications through other projects. So, we are looking at ways that we can take advantage of some of those funds and apply some of the projects that we have to that.
Yeah, when this project first went through the Department of Ecology's Water Quality Combined Funding Program, I think we applied back in 2020 now. The project ranked 17th out of 120 projects across the state. I anticipate with a better approach, with actually having some conceptual designs coming forward, that we would rank really high as well. So we anticipate there is a lot of money, you're right, coming down from various sources, taking full advantage of those in order to make sure that this project can be fully funded within the timeline that we're looking for.
Great. Awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Schneider, if you had any questions there. It's quiet there. I was curious just where the sediment, will there have to be mediation? Because right now it would go, it's below where like the people, like where people get in the river when they want to float it. Right, it's just, I'm trying to think of where in relation where the sediment would be landing. Do we have to do any remediation there to be able to at any point to be able to make the channel deeper, or will that just be something that'll be part of this study as well?
Go ahead, Meredith.
I was going to say, we don't anticipate doing anything to kind of like dredge the channel. Ultimately, a lot of that fine sediment is getting pushed further downstream. It's going to above the Tumwater Falls Dam, or it's going all the way down to Capitol Lake. So that's not really an active issue of it depositing within the project site. There is normal sediment transport in a river. It's kind of part of the game. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is restore a lot of those natural processes that are hopefully going to reduce the amount of fine sediment that's coming from the bank by reducing the amount of bank that's just being eaten away every single year.
All right. Okay, like I said, I'm poor Councilmember Charlie's frozen still on my screen, so I didn't know if you had any questions for us today. You've been on that bank on the other side planting lots of trees, so maybe you'd have some want to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I noticed Dan said we've been working on this project for a while time. It looks like if you enter a 2027 date, that'd be about 15 plus years. So it would seem to me, in your position, you probably could be or would be frustrated because of the lack of progress. So hopefully things will move along, and before you know it, we'll have it done, and we can sit back and appreciate all the effort you two put into it.
After this comes the next one. So, we just keep plugging along and taking care of it. Appreciate all the work that you're doing down there at East Street and have done down there with the trees at East Street, Charlie, because, that's where, anywhere we can put trees on the banks to help stabilize these shorelines, we reduce sediment and we improve the habitat conditions for salmon. So it all makes an effort.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, good. Well, with that, if we don't, there are no other questions, then we have a recommended action in front of us that City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign the service provider agreement with Stantec for the Pioneer Park Riparian Restoration Project Amendment 2. I have a motion to approve.
Move that we recommend approval.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I wasn't sure if we put so many things on consent, so I don't know if we want to loop them in just to let the council know the progress on this. Some people have been following it perhaps, and so what do you guys think as far as either consent or consideration or not? And what is the timeline on this as far as getting it? I don't want to delay this, so what is our timeline? Should we just send it to consent? I guess I should look at Dan or Karen.
This would go to the next council meeting, I think July 31st, that Monday.
Okay. So should we do it as consent then?
Yeah, so under the council rules, typically if it's not a controversial item then and it's been approved and recommended by committee, it goes straight to consent. But if you did want to schedule a presentation of some kind, you could do that.
Okay.
And an alternative could always be looking at a work session item later in the year, as well as we develop more information, maybe even as we have conceptual design that comes forward with this.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thanks, Dan. We'll go that direction. I appreciate that. So just want to make sure we loop our compatriots in as well. So, all right.
We'll
so
also
will
have
move this
like
to-
3 other items that we have to approve eventually as well too. Right? We'll have to eventually approve an amendment to the agreement with ecology and so on and so forth.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, okay. Well, thank you for that. We will put that on consent, and let's see, now we're going to move to our next item. So we're going to head off to the CFP.
Okay. And as with, Brandon, you saw last time we met, he did a high kind of level overview of the CFP for general fund and transportation. I am going to, I'm not sure if you see my screen there or not yet. Let's see. I'm going to try to get this into presentation mode. Are you seeing just the presentation, or are you seeing notes as well?
Presentation now.
Okay, perfect. So I'm just going to really do a high level overview for the utilities, water, sewer, and storm, and focus on some of the new projects. I'm not really going to get into this as Brandon really just did this for you last time you met about what it is and what it is not. I will just kind of highlight that it is not a financial commitment. It is kind of a plan, it's a forecast. It is looking at, do the utilities have sufficient funding to be able to accomplish the project workload? And this is also, regardless of staffing capacity and other things like that too, which we'll talk about a little bit later here. I'm going to be focusing on the utility projects, water, sewer, and storm. As you know, projects get onto these lists in many different ways. You saw this slide from Brandon. We have a multitude of reports. We've done a number of basin assessments. We continue to do basin assessments for stormwater. We have our water comprehensive plan, our sewer comprehensive plan that really help inform where these projects are coming from. We have anticipated growth that we know is happening in various areas. And so staff, also from a professional judgment standpoint, recognizes where, there's some limitations or some challenges might exist operationally, as well as from a planning perspective. And those are how projects will ultimately get on this plan. They are reviewed by staff in the utilities and the operational and as well as administration. We have a total of 49 projects. On the last CFP cycle, we had 50 projects for consideration. So we've added a couple and we've completed a couple, of those projects. And so we have, to be fair, this is a fairly aggressive project schedule, and is challenging. And so we hope to get to as many as we can, but we are challenged and limited in some ways. We'll talk about here. Again, no general fund dollars to support these projects. For the most part, these are all utility funded projects, for a total of 123.2 million over the course of 6 years for the 6-year total. On the drinking water side, we look at security, we look at water quality, we look at source development mitigation for growth, where we do have some operational challenges, whether it's fire flow or, do we have the appropriate infrastructure? Is the infrastructure sufficient quality? Is it today's standard, or is it an older drinking water main that we might need to replace? So really the drinking water CFP is the one that supports the infrastructure and the programs that support the operation, and then ultimately the expansion of the city's drinking water utility, because the city does not decrease in size, it only increases in size. So we also do have to be planning for that growth and for that next generation of water customers. Part of the limitations for the drinking for any of the utility CFPs is that they're really enterprise funds. So meaning the revenues that they generate through rates, connection fees, those are the only sources of funding that we have for for these projects. We can also look at grants and loans and bonds and other types of debt. The other category, where we have donations or interest earnings or miscellaneous revenues, are really the smallest percentage of revenues that we have and don't contribute a whole lot to the CFP, but it is another area. So I'm going to get into go into the funds now here. Slow me down, ask questions if I'm going too fast, or you have any particular questions on any one of the projects. Again, I'm going to focus on the new projects. Once I get through the new projects, I'll just give you a real high overview of what the existing projects that are on there. For drinking water, we have 14 projects. 2 of them are new. We've completed the Israel Road, or we will be completing by the end of this year, the Israel Road and Linderson water main replacement and upsizing. You've just seen that one recently through Public Works Committee, and that has just recently gone to bid and been awarded. And so that project is getting underway. The other one you see here that's been that we consider completed is the Trosper 6th and water main replacement and extension, and that's with the extensive amount of work that's happening at the Trosper and Capital Interchange and that work over there. So these projects will be completed by the end of this year, where we've removed them from the CFP, making room for the two new ones. First one we have is well 15 improvements. This is kind of in that category of security. So in the last biennium, the council had approved kind of a larger budget or rate increase. Part of that was including for security improvements and other structural improvements at some of our well sites. We are considering those for well 15. Well 15 is also our second largest producer in the city. And so we want to do some work to protect the well itself. We want to put some more additional security around it. We want to add some water quality protections. Part of this is the city is undergoing a corrosion study, right? Corrosion control study right now is kind of part of our lead and copper program and how optimized our system is. And while we meet all regulations, for that, the modeling is showing that we're not optimized. And so there are improvements that we can make. One of those improvements is looking at, adding corrosion control measures to well 15, likely on-site aeration, which is similar to what we have at Bush and Palermo well fields, but much smaller in scale. So the technology is improved so that, that kind of aeration can be done on a smaller scale. But there are other options such as chemical injection. And so we're going to be going through a study to kind of look at what makes the most sense over here at well 15. As we improve the physical site security and the building out there. Also adding auxiliary power, which we don't currently have to well 15. That's in case of an emergency. Again, our number 2 producer, we want to make sure that it is always at the ready for us. And this will add us, this has also been identified in our water system plan as one of the sources to help improve our redundancy and our capacity during peak time. So really looking at doing some of these improvements. And so this would start in 2025 come at a cost about $950,000 estimated at this point. The next project we have is more of a planning project, which will be kind of done in conjunction. You'll see this project pop up with the sewer CFP as well. This is one that was recommended in both kind of a homeland security evaluation that we did, as well as our water system and sewer system. Well, more of our water system planning process, as we're just going to be kicking off our sewer planning process this year. But really recognizing that we have vulnerabilities from a large seismic event, looking at that Cascadia level event. Excuse me. We want to make sure that we're starting to plan for what that looks like in a more concerted way between the two utilities. You might have heard Brandon or his team last week or last time we met talking about some of the improvements there for the Linderson and Israel water main. There are some facilities and fixtures that we're looking at installing currently that helps increase that stability during some of these events. This plan would be looking at, what are those technologies we need to apply? What are those materials that we need to add? Where? What is the backbone of our system? Obviously, we wouldn't be hardening our system to every single residence, but making sure that critical facilities are protected. That we have an ability to kind of respond to a major event like this and kind of go through all those planning processes for our drinking water and our sewer water utilities. So, or in our wastewater utilities. So this is the way the city's drinking waters portion of it, and looking to kick that off in the coming year in 2024. But it's likely to be a multi-year plan, so 24, 25, and I've split that up, as you'll see, with the two utilities. So the remaining 12 projects we have, you've seen here, you can see here, they're really kind of around source development, growth, infrastructure maintenance, and programs and planning. On the source development side, which is probably one of the biggest pushes that we're going to have over the next few years, is really with the Brewery well field, getting that getting some progress done with that one, getting the physical infrastructure built, and so we can actually put those water rights that we acquired a number of years ago, to work. We do have a consultant already has been hired for that with the new Water Resources Program Manager, Patrick Soderberg. He will be leading that effort for us. We've restarted conversations with the consultant, so that one is in progress and will be coming to you shortly, probably in the next, maybe by the first meeting in September with the new amendment to that contract, because the first agreement I want to say was signed back in 2015 or something like that, and has been on hold as we've negotiated with our partners, Lacey and Olympia, on the ultimate disposition of the water rights there. And then, of course, the Brewery well field, once we begin the construction, we're going to want to decommission all of the 30 odd wells that are on the ground there in the golf course, and that'll be a major undertaking as well. But we're waiting to start that once we finish with the partners. On the growth side, as I mentioned, this is kind of new source development planning. That's also in progress. Patrick Soderberg will be helping with that project as well. That one, we do have a consultant that we're talking with right now, and hope to bring forward an agreement to you shortly. Councilmember Althauser, you'll notice in that contract that we also are talking about kind of the cost of service. Last year we were talking a lot about what our rates are sufficient and our connection fees and some of the pieces in there. So that'll also be a component, although they're kind of separate issues, but it'll be under the same contract, because those are also things that came out of our water system plan that Carollo had helped us with. And then another project in progress right now is our Southeast Reservoir and System Extension down off of 93rd. So this is the big new 3 million gallon tank that we'll be installing down there, kind of on that bluff just off of 93rd Avenue, and some main improvements along 93rd there as well to get that water out. So these three projects, and of course the city O&M facility, are all in progress. We have a number of these that while we don't you don't see everything every day, these are projects that are in process. On the infrastructure and maintenance, again, two projects in progress, Capitol Boulevard, Next Street, and then we've been doing some work with consultants on resource conservation and sustainability, looking at our facilities and how sustainable that they can be, operative and reduce, and efficient really is how energy efficient those can be. And then, of course, on the programs and planning, those are more just kind of the ongoing routine efforts that we have. ERP, which is the Enterprise Resource Planning that Finance has been working on, the conversion to Munis. And then ultimately we have the comprehensive plan update, which will start a few years down the road. Any questions on the drinking water before I move into sewer? Okay. Sanitary sewer is similar issue. This is really about our wastewater. So we are a conveyance only system. We don't treat. We send all of our wastewater down to Lot. Lot takes care of the treatment for us. So this is kind of a more focused CFP that looks at more just kind of infrastructure replacement and expansion, and then try to address growth and where do we need these facilities to be in place. But very similar to the water, we have rates and connection fees that help fund it, and we can be backed up by grants and revenue bonds and loans and other debt, and again the miscellaneous revenues that exist. We have 14 projects here as well. 2 have been completed. One is related to all the work there at Capitol and Trosper. As you can see there, Capitol, Trosper, Linda street sewer replacement, and then of course resource conservation and sustainability. And we've done some evaluation through our systems about where we can improve that. We've looked at solarizing some of those systems and basically done what we can at that point. So this will fall off of here, but we'd be looking at certainly efficiencies as they come up in the future. Just don't have something programmed in here on the sewer side. Again, the
Can I ask
seismic.
a question about that real
Yes.
quick before we move on?
Mhm.
For solarization, in terms of doing what we can, I mean, is that sort of more challenge fiscally or technologically in terms of being able to generate enough power for, I assume that's for like the lift stations, right? Because those are the
Right.
big electricity consumption units
Correct.
in the water system.
Correct.
So is that like sort of a reflection on, like, you would need a big solar array in order to actually power that? Or is it more like this just isn't really economically feasible for how much you would have to do
I would say it's more the array that would be needed in the location. A lot of these are also in treed areas, so
Yeah.
don't to have that kind of that direct connection to solar that we would like. But yeah, we've looked at a number of lift stations with our consultant that we're working with on kind of the citywide analysis of our facilities and operations, and really nothing kind of rose to the level of cost efficiency or cost effectiveness that would get us to the place that we needed to be. So. That was really it was the array, and then it came down to cost too. So, you could
Yeah.
probably do something, but would it be cost effective, and would it make sense to get for the power that you would need to power there? And also taking into consideration that we do purchase our power from, through the Green Power Program with PSE. So, effectively really wouldn't be adding much benefit to the city.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Here is the sewer portion of the seismic resiliency plan. It's significantly bigger than the water side. We've done some work on the water side, which is why that is less at this point. And so kind of the sewer would kind of the sewer portion will be helping us kind of catch up on the sewer end of things, really taking a deep dive, into the sewer. And so, we're looking at probably overall, a $300,000 plan, at the end of the day, looking at, not only just infrastructure, but also kind of utility response needs and things along those lines. So again, a 2-year project. This is the wastewater portion of that. And then the last new project is the Kimmy Street Lift Station. This was a kind of model deficiencies identified through the 2015 water system plan. So looking at doing some early initial evaluations next year, getting design and permitting in 25, and ultimately in construction into 26. This is a forecast at this point. We are kicking off our sewer system comp plan, which is one of the existing projects that you'll see on that list, the comprehensive plan update. Last one was done in 2015. We are updating that this year, and it'll probably carry to next year. And so that will inform also kind of the priority for the Kimmy Street Lift Station and some of the other projects that might have a later implementation date on that capital plan too. So subject to change on that one. But this is kind of where we're at today. We have the programs and planning to the larger pieces, the annual sewer infrastructure replacement. That's really just looking at our existing assets. What is the material and condition? Are there any kind of programmed road improvements that we can kind of coordinate those with? We have an extension program that really, hopefully over the next year, we'll be able to bring some proposals to council for your consideration, to committee for consideration, as to what some of those pieces look like. And then we can start working on kind of the actual construction, what I would call the easier pieces, to get that one done. But that's why it has an asterisk there. It's been one we've been wanting to get on. I know with Patrick on board, we'll be able to make some headway there in coordination with our transportation engineering department, as well as our finance community development folks that are also kind of looking at ways to serve some of our existing neighborhoods. Comp plans in progress, business system Munis, the transition to Munis is in progress. The O&M facility is in progress. We have always as a placeholder as a regional pump station. It's not identified, but it is funding to support if there is an area for growth that is needed. We maintain some of that, almost a reserve for that work that it might be done in coordination with some kind of development that we haven't seen yet come in. And then the remaining projects there, Capitol Boulevard, Next Street, Lloyd lift station, Streamland Estates lift stations. Again, those are some program infrastructure improvements in the coming years. Any questions on sewer before I move to storm? Okay. Same spiel with the storm drain. This is real, but these are projects that don't have, I have connection fees inaccurately on here. There are no connection fees for our stormwater system, but rates really is primarily a source of funding, along with grants. That we are very heavily reliant upon grants for CFP projects relating to stormwater. Just heard about Pioneer Park. You'll be hearing about one's coming up as well, for that. And so we're always trying to seek that as needed. We also have bonds and loans and other types of debts that we can look for there. But these are really projects that are looking at, how do we collect and convey stormwater to reduce flooding within our city, as well as, dealing with water quality needs, the TMDL, total maximum daily load, other regulatory expectations to the city's stormwater permit to deal with water quality and habitat conservation. And we also kind of expand into the dealing with endangered species and implementation of the permits that we have. So we try to accomplish a lot with a little bit of funding. We have a $30 million program outlined here. We have 21 projects, so it's a lot of projects, and a lot of them have been added over the last I want to say, decade with the annexations that the city has completed. We've done basin analysis in those areas. What do we need in those areas? What's the surface water conditions looking like? So we have a lot more projects on the stormwater CFP, and I actually have a backlog of other projects, that's not on this list at all, that we'll continue to try and chip away with. But as you can see here, we have a $30 million total project cost over the 6 years, of that we're trying to make up almost 20 million in grants and other revenues like bonds and debts, bonds and loans for that. Two of the projects we've recently completed, Lee Street bioretention retrofit in conjunction with the Capital Prosper work that's all being done there. That project was integrated into that. And then also the Deschutes River flood reduction and erosion study, which we'd like to bring back to committee at some point in the near future to give you kind of the overview of what the ultimate outcome of that was and that planning work that was done. The team from Stantec and Greer Environmental Consulting there, Meredith, did a great job kind of pulling together a lot of information for the city so we can have that to share and really have a better understanding of what is needed down there. The first project I've called out as kind of a new-ish project is this land acquisition, wetland and habitat conservation. We've always had kind of a land acquisition line in here to help with mitigation for stormwater project where, wetlands might be impacted and we'd have to acquire new wetlands. I've expanded this category to include the habitat conservation piece of it. There are a number of properties that are coming available or might be available that we could look at along the Deschutes River area, as well as some Kersop area wetlands that we could be looking at as conservation goes. And so have increased kind of the scope for this project and included some more funding. And so there was a significant expansion of funds that are looking at, from this aspect, for the city.
For this piece, Stan, for habitat conservation, this is separate and apart from when we think of habitat conservation plan for the gopher specifically. Absolutely. This is different habitat conservation.
Yeah,
correct?
This is wetlands. This is riparian area. This is outside of kind of those endangered species issues.
Got it. Thanks.
The next one we've got is a 2020, the new one, and this is really just kind of, making sure that we have a reserve and we are looking forward. We completed our last stormwater manual or stormwater comprehensive plan. I need to update that. This is really our management plan, not the manual, the drainage manual. And this is really looking at kind of our next major planning process for the utility. We are doing lots of little basin. You might have heard Dave and Meredith talk about our SMAP, our stormwater management action planning processes that we're going through, and those are very basin specific. This comprehensive plan really kind of ties all those together, looks at the utilities funding capacity, very similar to the water and sewer or water and sewer plans that we have developed in the last comprehensive stormwater plan we did as well. So we're not looking at this one until 2027 to wrap that one up in 28. So we'll be on a 10-year cycle, kind of complementing the other two utilities as well. The last new project we have for the stormwater is the East Dennis outfall retrofit. We've identified off of East Dennis that there is an unmitigated, untreated outfall collecting a significant portion of runoff from kind of this kind of City Hall Israel Road, area that discharges out towards Dennis. And so we'll be looking at, programming in some analysis and some retrofit of that. And so there's some additional work that we'll be doing in advance of this. This is why it's a little bit farther out, and also kind of dealing with, kind of staff capacity with all of the projects that we have kind of in the hopper right now.
Can I ask a question about that one too? Sorry to just keep jumping.
No worries.
So this one's this one's pretty far out. That's mostly a reflection of staff capacity. Seems concerning that, I mean, is that this is just entirely untreated and being discharged into the river. So that's mostly a capacity issue, just because, I mean, the list of projects already on our plan is ambitious. I totally recognize that. This one just strikes me as pretty concerning.
Yeah, and to be real, most of our outfalls are not treated. We've treated some of the more significant ones so far. We're working on the M Street outfall, working on the East Street outfall. Those are still, or the East Linwood outfall. Those are still ones that are significant outfalls, are still to this day don't have treatment, but are in the process. We're trying to get grant funding. We have conceptual designs, or we have some level of designs. So there's a lot of work that we're kind of doing on these larger tributaries, these larger outfalls. Currently, there's some work that needs to be done in advance of this so we can better understand the level of treatment that is needed. Some of that work is going on and will be going on in the years leading up to this. And so it's a staff capacity. It's, you know, what works we currently have underway, and that recognizing that we do still need some work out there, but we also know that we do want to do something at some point to, you know, make sure that this is on our radar and we're working towards it. And so it becomes kind of more of a priority issue. You know, we know that all stormwater has stuff in it, so to speak, you know, but we need to understand better what that stuff is so we can understand what is the level of treatment that is needed. And some of that work will be done in the preceding years.
And I guess this street probably has less traffic on it than some of those other ones where we have them that we're going to be addressing sooner. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
So previous and ongoing, again, these are the remaining projects on that list. From a water quality, habitat, and fish improvement considerations, we'll be looking again, Tumwater Valley Regional Facility, the M Street outfall, the Chutes habitat restoration projects. You know, part of that is the Pioneer Park. We have a number of other projects that we're looking at. There's some erosion happening off of Tumwater Valley Drive. You know, so those are kind of all considered in there. The East Linwood Basin outfall retrofit, again, another one that I just mentioned, looking at a larger kind of a watershed wide funding source, floodplains by design. This is one of the projects that I mentioned that Meredith is working towards, and trying to encapsulate all of these projects together. We also have the South Sap Road culvert replacement, Percival Creek fish barrier removal project that's in progress. We have a 66th Ave culvert replacement, similar work, but all the way on the other side of town that is scheduled in here. Where we can work with sustainability and conservation through, you know, whether the tree board or other kind of urban forestry and other issues that are connected through the stormwater utility, and there's kind of some funding reserves for that. We also have the infrastructure maintenance side. We have some challenges on the golf course. And I want to be clear, there's a distinction, because I know Brandon had brought up some work that's in the general fund CFP. There's a portion of the drainage system through the golf course that discharges into the Chutes River that is part of the city's public stormwater system. And so we've delineated those areas where those areas are the responsibility of the stormwater utility to maintain and provide those conveyances. That's what this would be addressing there. And we have, as I mentioned.
Dan, on that one?
Yes.
Okay. On the golf course one, because we received an email, is that in relation to, because they were calling out the potential of losing some of the golf because of the drainage there? Is that the area you're talking about that has already been called out?
There's a number of challenges down there, I want to say, and there are some areas that are golf course drainage specific that I think we've seen some sinkholes and we've seen some other challenges. There's also some that are related to the city's conveyance system. And so where we find those, I'm not sure I know the specific location where the email might have been referring to, but there are funds available to address the stuff on both sides. And that's the stuff that Brandon has been working on with the general fund CFP to deal with the golf course related items. And this one would deal with the stormwater related pieces. You know, and our goal is to protect, you know, the golf course to the extent that we can, you know, while also making sure that the drainage, you know, systems continues to convey and not undermine the golf course in other areas.
Thank you.
Yep. I mentioned earlier some of the basin plans that we've done. That's where the 29th Avenue stormwater and Beehive industrial area stormwater improvements have been identified. And then we have some Capitol Boulevard storm upsizing, which may be completed. I need to check with transportation engineering on that with the work that they've done. And the North Custer Stormway stormwater redirection has been on our plan for a minute here. Flooding mitigation mostly out in the Kersop area. We've identified through that annexation studies that we completed in 2012. There's some work to be done out there, and we are slowly making progress, looking at those areas. And then the last one kind of came out of one of the basin planning projects is the Kreitz stormwater improvements out there as well. That's basically to help expand that size and increase infiltration. So if you've ever driven around Kreitz fill station on that bend there after a stormwater event, there's a fairly significant flood that happens across the roadway there. So we're looking at addressing that. So as I mentioned, big projects, big plans, and big challenges. On each one of these plans on that summary page, I've identified who would be, the lead entity, and that's water resources or transportation engineering, for those projects that are more traditional in engineering. And we recognize that we have those challenges with the resources in both staffing and the staffing capacity and the funds to get us there. We were able to balance all of these funds to keep us above the operating reserve requirements and maintain a healthy forecast, moving into the 2029, 2030 timeframe, the end of this plan. But we've had to do that, with looking at increases on the water, sewer, and stormwater utility rates, as well as increases for connection fees. And again, that gets us there financially. It does not necessarily get us there from a staffing capacity standpoint. And consultants, while they can be a huge help, I can't tell you how helpful Meredith has been to our department. And while she was former city staff, as a consultant, really taking a lot of these stormwater projects and helping us balance and manage those. But with consultants still comes a staff capacity, and the staff need to manage those consultants. While we can hire consultants, we still need staff to be able to manage those consultants. And I know staff are pretty much at their limits for the amount of projects that we have. So we're going to be looking at what that looks like for us in the future. Identifying leads on these CFP sheets kind of helps us say, okay, what is the kind of the anticipated need for both of our departments, transportation engineering and water resources, and how do we move those forward. Inflation and the market forces this year have really, it's really challenged our residents, our customers, in many ways. It's also challenging us. We're seeing significant increases in labor and materials. And so, kind of have some of those general increases here in water. We've seen almost a 35% increase, and we do a 3 to 5% increase on our water rates, but we've seen a 35% increase in labor and construction costs for projects like this. The Southeast Reservoir was one of the most significant we saw. And that's a big project to begin with. I think it was originally programmed at $12 million. That has been increased 132%. This year with the final bidding and whatnot, where we're at today and the anticipated construction costs. So significant increases across the board. And we're seeing it in all the utilities. Sewer has an average 37% increase, on the projects with the forecasts this year. The two lift stations in and of themselves, which are probably the more easier to evaluate an engineering cost, had 110% increase in those costs, for those for those two projects alone. In stormwater, we are seeing, the costs are all over the board sometimes, but they're always up. And, on average, all of the projects, had increased about 115%. And that's not with the two outliers where I've added additional monies, and that's in the land and habitat acquisition. And one of the other projects that's similar to that, I pulled those out because we've increased our funding in them. So that artificially increased what those what the overall increase was to those. But 115% was pretty intense what we're seeing from construction costs and estimates coming in on similar projects that we have programmed in there. So, as I said, this is kind of a very conservative look when you look at those summary pages as far as what the values are, but we wanted to make sure that we were trying to really kind of price these projects out and forecast these projects with what we're seeing today. Market forces may change in coming years, which may reduce, some of those impacts, from a, labor and material standpoint. But the bottom line is we were able to make it happen with some of these rate increases. On the water side, we're dealing a lot with growth. A lot of those projects deal with growth. And so what I tried to do, you'll see on that cover sheet, you'll propose a water rate increase scenario that, keeps it around 5-6% and drops it down in later years to 4.5%, but really increases the connection fee costs. And again, this will be something we'll also look in our cost of service study in the coming year to say, is this appropriate to help us get there? But going from a 2% connection fee increase, for the coming year, my recommendation is that we increase that to 4.8% to match the increase on the proposed water rate increase. So there's at least a kind of a comparable increase there, and then increasing that upwards of 8.5 to 10% in coming years on the connection fee piece, because a lot of these projects, are really to deal with and to manage growth, and is not a reflection of our current customer base. On the sewer side, a little bit more consistent, looking at, 5.8%, current, is our current, I believe our increase for the sewer rates, and kind of trying to keep that consistent about 5% in coming years, and then increasing the connection fees in coming years across the board at 3%, gets us where we need to be. And, similar on storm, the percent increases might look pretty 8.5%, and then declining over coming years to 8%, 7%, 6.5%, and that really kind of reflects for our residential customers, less than $1 or $2 a month. And we'll be forecasting that, as we look at that closer come budget season. But debts and loans and bonds actually play a really big picture in all of this puzzle as well for us. We're looking at in the water side with some significant projects at probably about $50 million in bonds and loans over the course of the next few years. And, and at the end of the day, we've, debt is not a bad thing for utilities. It expands our capacity to be able to do projects. And in this case, we have a lot of big projects that this will allow us to do. And then we can also, then that gets also amortized over time, which is then kind of recognition of that growth that we are trying to support as well. Really, it kind of brings us to the end here. This is, you guys see that third green arrow. The next steps are the Planning Commission, and I know some of these dates are to be determined and coordinated with Brad in Community Development, and we will bring this back to Public Works Committee if there are any major significant changes, based on any feedback. So I'm welcome to feedback today or anytime in the next 2 months. If something pops up for you, let me know. And as we work towards finalization, I know the full council will see all of these plans once again, probably September, late September, October, maybe early November timeframe. And so as those dates get sorted out, like I said, if there's any major changes that come out of a Planning Commission process, to these issues, additions, subtractions, we'll bring the briefing back to Public Works Committee for you. And with that, that's what I got for you today.
Okay, do we have questions? So I just want clarification then, as far as this part goes. It looks like we'll be completing the CFP by October. Looks like we'll be adopting it then, and that's different than the comprehensive plan, which we have a couple of years to be updating our comprehensive plan, correct?
Correct. So this is ultimately a part of that, and this will feed into that, but the CFP piece itself will be adopted by the end of the year.
Okay. Ambitious. There's a lot going on. So thank you. Does anybody have any other questions for Dan here? Okay. All right.
I do
Well,
just
with
want to
that,
note
yes.
that
Okay, go
you're
ahead.
at 9
Yes, sir.
o'clock, so if there are any time constraints, I know Meredith has got a fairly quick presentation, but it is just an update. We can bring it back at a later time, as well, so.
I'm good. I'm not sure about the rest of my council members here.
I'm good. I'm good on time.
Okay,
I'm good as well.
okay. Let's hear from Meredith on the project update.
Awesome. I will try to be speedy. Make sure that we aren't here for too much longer, knowing that you all have busy schedules to get back to. This is a pretty quick update from the Somerset Hill Fish Passage Barrier Removal Design. I believe I came February, March, presenting kind of a resolution to you all, going over this project. We've got a little bit more information now about some of the alternatives, best steps forward, and then also some updates on kind of what timing looks like for this project. Really quick overview to kind of place set for this project. We're talking about the Somerset Hill area along Percival Creek. So this is in kind of the northwestern portion of Tumwater. Percival Creek as a whole is about 4 miles long. We've been doing a lot of work on it. It's the location of the Sap Road culvert project, which is about a half-mile upstream of this, as well as the Sap Road Park, about the 12 acres that the city of Tumwater has been restoring for quite some time now. Ultimately, the limiting factors along this area are fish passage barriers, high stream temperatures, lack of large woody debris, aka trees falling into the river, and lack of habitat. This site was kind of first brought to the attention of the city back in the fall because of somebody going and checking out the sewer main. So there's a sewer main that runs back here. It feeds kind of the housing complex back there. And the area where the culvert and the stream run kind of runs straight into the bank. So we're seeing a ton of erosion along this slope here, which was worrying from a sewer perspective, because if some of the trees, especially the large ones in here, end up being eroded and falling out, there's potential of breaking that sewer main back there. So this was put on Water Resources and Sustainability's kind of radar from that perspective. And really, when we're thinking about what can we do if we have culvert related projects, there's a lot of funding right now out there for culvert improvement projects based on fish habitat. We've been through this. We went through it with the Sap Road culvert, and we're successful in getting design and construction funding. So that was kind of the approach going forward, was seeing what we could do from a culvert perspective to really try and reduce erosion here by letting the stream do what it naturally wants to do. The stream shouldn't be taking this really hard turn. That's what's causing all this erosion. So what can we do from that perspective? So currently they've got about a 5-foot culvert that's about 103 feet long. It's considered a partial barrier from a fish passage perspective due to velocity. When we're looking at how large a structure would need to be in order to let the stream move more naturally, in order for us to be able to re-meander it away from that erosive site, we need at least 24 feet wide. So that's quite the increase from the 5-foot culvert we have out there right now. The city of Tumwater has an on-call contract with Skillings Environmental Consulting. And what we were really hoping to do over the last kind of 6 months was take a look at different crossing alternatives to figure out what the best kind of option for moving forward was. The first option was a 3-sided box culvert that's about 24 feet wide. The pros of this is that it's 100% fish passable. However, one of the cons is the stream isn't able to move naturally. We kind of re-meander the stream in order for it to match kind of up and downstream reaches, but the stream wouldn't be able to then go and kind of move all over the place and more naturally because it'd be confined to that 24-foot wide area. In addition, there's potential for running into issues of how wide the footings are. So one of the benefits of a 3-sided box culvert is that you're able to see in the photo here, you can have a natural creek run through the bottom of it. When we were going and working through the Sap Road project, and we did geotechnical work, which is trying to figure out what does the soil look like under the site, we found out that the soil, at least a half-mile up from here, was pretty darn non-conforming. So we would have to put really, really large footings in there in order to keep the culvert stable. We want to make sure that this is stable when it comes to having a roadway over it, when it comes to earthquakes and things like that. Ultimately, it led to us having to put in a 4-sided box culvert on Sap Road because we weren't able to, because if we were going to be putting in footings, they were going to be so wide that there was only going to be about a 6-inch opening that was natural. So that's something that we might have to think about here and something we learn more in geotechnical investigations. Overall, when looking at kind of the 3 alternatives that Skilling's looked at from a design and construction point of view, this option was about medium for both of them. The second option is a steel plate arch culvert, again, 24 feet wide. Pros, it's 100% fish passable, which is what we're going for here. It's also the cheapest option. One of the cons is it, again, doesn't allow the stream to move naturally, and it doesn't have an option for the natural channel bottom. As you can see in the photo, we've got more of the corrugated metal along the bottom there. That's a little worse for fish passage. It's also doesn't create as much habitat as you're having to deal with some kind of man-made structures within the stream channel. Ultimately, it was the lowest cost for design and construction. The last option that they looked at was a prefabricated bridge. Ultimately, these are bridges that can be made somewhere else and then brought to the site and kind of dropped into place. The pros of this is it's 100% fish passable. Because it's so much larger than the other 2 options, it also allows the creek to move naturally within it. Additionally, it's the preferred alternative from project stakeholders. Dan had mentioned kind of the RIA 13 committee who'd been informing on the Pioneer Park project. They're also a similar stakeholder group for this project, and it's the kind of option that they are most favorable of. The cons is it, like always, is the most expensive option, both from a design and construction cost. As we were going through and figuring out what we wanted to design, we ended up taking forward to the Salmon Recovery Funding Board a planning-only grant to design a prefabricated bridge. This was going to be a 90% package. It was going to allow us to design the culvert replacement, the stream realignment, some bank restoration, and keyly that bank stabilization effort in order to make sure that we're not going to lose those trees and ultimately that sewer line. We had asked for about $280,000 for a project that required no match from the city. The surfboard process is kind of a 6-month-long regional process. Ultimately, the project right now is ranked 4th out of 6 of those projects. Based on how much funding we're anticipating coming to the watershed, we don't think that it'll be funded this fall. Like Dan had mentioned, the stormwater CFP is pretty darn big at the moment. So this might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise of not having to take on another project at the moment. However, we are thinking about next steps. And what I'm hoping we can have at least a little bit of time for today is talking about kind of 2 kind of approaches that we're looking for. Ultimately, while this project was identified last year and flagged as kind of something that we were concerned about from an erosion perspective and losing that sewer line, a tree assessment was done by a certified arborist back in December of 2022. And while we do see in this photo here that there are some roots showing, he didn't consider any of the roots to be main roots. He didn't think that any of the trees were at immediate danger of collapsing in. So we have a little bit more time to work on the project than initially thought, which is great from kind of the funding perspective we're at right now. Ultimately, we're hoping to hear a little bit of feedback from Public Works Committee about if there is support for continuing to move forward, looking for design funding for that prefabricated bridge option. Ultimately, it's the best option from a habitat perspective, even though it is a little bit more costly. In addition, kind of the funding plan right now is to go back to the surfboard next year. That process would start in January and seek funding again. The good news is we pretty much already have an entire application completed because we went through it this round. There's also options to seek other funding, and probably something that we keep an eye on is what other sources might be out there. Ultimately, this would lead to kind of a construction date of 2027 or later, depending on how long it takes us to get funding for design. I know that was a lot. Hopefully not too much, but I'm hoping that there's some opportunity for questions and discussion about the current approach, and if there's any kind of feedback on a different approach that Public Works Committee would like to see with this project.
All right, Michael, looks like you.
Yes, so this, I mean, I think the bridge makes a lot of sense. I guess just my questions about funding. You know, I sort of asked this a little bit earlier, but there's also tons of money for salmon and for restoration. But what does, we're obviously probably going to be aiming for grants to pay for a majority of this project. Does that the bottom line is bigger? Does that mean that the city that would potentially have a larger match that would be associated with it if we're trying to go after some of the fish passage barrier removal dollars as part of the, is it the Bolt decision that led to this, or is that the other one about water? I forget the names of the specific cases, but like are we trying to make up the difference between the projects and grants, or is there probably going to be additional fiscal cost associated for the city if we go for the more expensive one?
Yeah, I think ultimately what we're trying to do here is to find ways to have this through grant funding. If this, from a priority standpoint, started to rank higher because we were concerned about bank stabilization, we were concerned about, continued erosion. We do have a sewer main that runs through there. That would increase our prioritization on this because of the assessments we've done this year, and saying you've got some time to give this some thought, find some additional funding, that it wasn't an emergency as we were concerned about earlier on, that it gives us a lot more comfort to say, okay, let's keep this on the radar. We know this is something that we need to do. Let's find, the funding package that makes the most sense to do the best work. So, as Meredith indicated, the stakeholders, all looked at this work as well, and said, yeah, let's, if you're going to do this, put in the bridge that makes the most sense. It is the most expensive, and it's not one of the higher ranking fish impediments. It is, I think, an impediment, and Meredith probably knows what the number is, but it's not like, an obstruction where they can't get through. So improvements are needed there, but again, the banks are relatively stable. The trees aren't going to undermine that bank, immediately. So we have time to find a funding package that makes sense for the city without having to necessarily, go to a bond or a debt request, that would increase kind of that, that we would be going if this was a higher priority for us. We'd be looking at those options a lot more heavily, intensely. So looking for the best grant funding process.
Yeah, like Dan had mentioned, we're looking at this from kind of a fish passage perspective because there is so much funding out there right now for culvert replacements. It's considered a 66% passable, so only a third of fish can't access it during the year. The Sap Road culvert is 100% passable, so that one ranks a lot higher on a lot of grant applications because no fish can get past it. So we benefit a little bit from doing a lot of work within Percival Creek, the Sap Road project. There have been 2 other culverts fixed by other project stakeholders along this area. So there's only kind of 2 culverts that are partly passable now, which is awesome. Somerset Hill is one of them. So we benefit from being able to build off of work that we have done, but we are hit a little bit by the fact that there are so many other culverts across the state that are still full fish passage barriers. That being said, we are looking at grant applications. I anticipate, because this isn't something that, like as Dan mentioned, that is imminently that needs to get done from an infrastructure standpoint on the sewer line, that we will be able to get grant funding. And a lot of those funding, especially for fish passage, the maximum match requirement is about 15%. We think we can get design funding with 0 match requirement. The construction might require a 15% match, but really the goal is to be able to get that construction funding, and most of it would be grant funded.
So if the other projects were in the $2 million range, this is in the $3 million range, then potentially, if it's a 15% grant match, then the delta between a cheaper option is about $150,000 potentially, as a rough ballpark.
Yes. And
Okay.
like Dan mentioned, we're seeing a lot of inflation right now. So we had construction costs calculate based on if inflation goes at the same rate and you're constructing in 2026. Who knows kind of what will actually happen? And a lot of this is subject to the bids that we receive.
Sure.
But that's kind of ballpark figures what we're thinking right now.
Yeah, for a much better result. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, that was interesting, the numbers about how many fish can get through at this point, so I can see where not the sense of urgency, but as far as the sewer connection goes, have we, with the incidents that we have had, I would think that might raise it to a little bit higher as far as, being able to secure that whole area.
And that's
So-
what we've had engineering evaluations. We've had consultants go out there. We've had our engineering team go out there from transportation engineering and give us kind of, best professional judgments. And, and the consensus is that, yeah, you're going to want to do something, but doesn't need to be imminent. And so, again, we have that time, we have that flexibility, that sewer line is not being undermined an emergency rate, so again, we have some flexibility, we have some time, we want to do something, but it doesn't need to be today or tomorrow. It could be, in a couple of years out, depending on when we can get some good funding to do this as a whole project. But, of course, we will continue to monitor that site, as you know, that we put in that remote monitoring for the overflow so we can reduce, the incidence potentials for that, and, we do have staff out there on a regular basis that will report back, if they see any changes in the stability of the bank for us. So.
Okay. It's good to know that that giant tree, the grand fir is still safe, even though, yeah, we hate to lose that one. So thank you. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? No? Okay. Looks like we have now come to the end of our agenda for today. So if there are no further items to discuss, I will call the Thursday, July 20th, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting adjourned. Enjoy the sunshine. It's a
Thank you.
gorgeous day.